Good morning and welcome back. Today we have reached day 300 in our 365 days of Bible study. We're looking at the law, we're looking at who David's son is, and we see Jesus getting on really rather well with a scribe who has a brain about him. We are at the moment looking at the story of Jesus from St. Mark's Gospel, which is largely copied by Matthew and Luke. And today's reading is from Mark chapter 12, verses 28 to 40. Hearing them discussing together, one of the scribes came over to them. He could see that Jesus was answering the Sadducees in a good way. So he asked Jesus, which is the most important of the commandments? Jesus answered, the first commandment is this: Pay attention, Israel. The Lord our God, the Lord himself, is one. You are obliged to love the Lord your God with your whole heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: you are obliged to love your neighbour as you love yourself. There exist no other commandments more important than these. And the scribe said to him, How right you are, teacher! You have said the truth. He is one, and there is no other. And loving him with all your heart and understanding and strength, and loving your neighbour as yourself, that's much more important than all the whole burnt offerings and sacrifices. And when Jesus saw how wisely he had answered, he said to him, You are not far from God's kingdom. After that, nobody dared to ask him questions. Teaching in the temple, Jesus made this answer: How can the scribes possibly insist that the Messiah has to be a descendant of David? David was inspired by the Holy Spirit when he declared, The Lord said to my Lord, Sit at my right hand until I place your enemies beneath your feet. Here David calls the Messiah his Lord, so how can he be his son? There was a great crowd there, happily taking in all he had to say. He continued to teach, saying, Watch out for the scribes. How they like to parade around in flowing robes. How they love to be greeted in the markets. They take the best seats in the synagogues. They sit in honoured places at dinner parties. But they devour the houses of widows. While pretending to spend a long time in prayer, they will be the ones who will receive most condemnation. So, back to the beginning of that reading. How refreshing it is to see Jesus and a scribe getting on so well together. Here is a scribe with some subtlety in his understanding, and one who didn't mind using his intelligence. Scribes and Pharisees obviously didn't see all the Old Testament laws as equally important or equally weighty. And that is how the scribe came to ask the question, which is the most important of the commandments. Jesus begins his answer with a quotation from a creed-like text that many devout Jews would have said every day from the book of Deuteronomy. It's the Jews' creed, the Shema. Pay attention, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord himself is one. You are obliged to love the Lord your God with your whole heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The scribe had asked which commandment was the most important, and Jesus had answered with words that the scribe would have known well. But then Jesus added what seemed to us an inseparable second part. You are obliged to love your neighbour as you love yourself. This isn't an invitation to us to love ourselves too much, of course. We are all sinners after all. Jesus is saying that in these words, God is addressing us as we are, and it is as sinners that we love ourselves. Therefore, we are to love our imperfect neighbours in just the same way, with understanding and forgiveness. Now, the middle part of this reading is a bit odd, the bit about David. it looks like the detached ending of another conversation with person or persons unknown. Someone, probably a scribe, had been provoking Jesus into saying something incriminating about himself with the Romans, or discrediting himself in the eyes of the crowds that followed him. His human ancestry, he says, is of little importance to him. It is enough that he is human. What he doesn't want is for people to start seeing him as the wrong kind of Messiah. He is not setting out to be the enemy of the occupying Romans, nor is he wanting to replace the fake king of the Jews named Herod with himself. As he says later at his trial, my kingdom is not of that kind. Mark then attaches a criticism of the outward show that scribes make of their religion and their piety, words that have echoed down the centuries, reminding us all not to play act our faith to impress others or to deceive ourselves. We all know better than that. But inevitably, the time moves on. Tomorrow, at Bethany, we see Jesus anointed ahead of time for his burial. And we see Judas Iscariot setting off to make plans for the downfall of his leader. I'll see you tomorrow.